Hey, good morning, everyone. I would like to start just thanking Ms. Letizia Moratti, Mr. Jack Attali for the invitation to be here. As I've just been presented, I come from the Executive Office of the Secretary General of the United Nations. In the Office of the Secretary General, it is very well reflected the importance that in the highest office of the UN, it has been given to climate change. Within this executive office, the Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, he has established a climate change team, and I'm part of this team. We're in charge of providing him with advice in anything related to climate change, with the view of the negotiations that governments are undergoing right now to have a universal climate change agreement in December in Paris. So I would just start by now telling you a little story about myself. I work at the UN. I don't carry my national passport, but I'm obviously influenced by who I am, where I come from. I'm originally from Mexico. And I remember growing up in Mexico, in the southeast of Mexico, a nice, warm place. I come from a relatively small city, 30 minutes by car back then from the beach, and I would go every summer, spend the 2 months at the beach. It was beautiful, the house where my family stayed at. Back then, one needed to walk almost 100 meters to go from the house to get to the shore. And similar stories I've heard from colleagues of mine. I have a colleague from Barbados who, also a beautiful island in the Caribbean. She would go to the beach the whole time, all year round, beautiful beaches with a lot of sand, and that's how she grew up. Now, when I went back home a few months ago, I went back to the same beach I used to go as a child, and there's a huge difference. Now it's from the same house where before we needed to walk these 100 meters. Now it's just 5 to 10 meters, depending on the year, how the lunar cycles are, where the sea has gone through during the night. But it's a huge difference from having to walk 100 meters to 10 meters, and this has been just within 15, 20 years. The same, my colleague from Barbados tells me a similar story. Now the sea in Barbados is basically hitting palm trees that used to be several dozens, also about 100 meters from the shoreline. So we see that climate change is happening. We've seen in one of the presentations before how greenhouse gas emissions, which are the cause of man-made climate change, have risen over the last century. They've risen really rapidly, and the planet is reaching its boundaries of how many greenhouse gases it can absorb. And this is the reason that governments, inspired by people who are demanding for action, and governments have been taking decisions backed by science. So it's not just people demanding something without facts. There are studies, there are facts that are presented, that are discussed with government representatives, and based on these facts, they have been taking decisions. So in December 2012, all governments decided to initiate a process of negotiations that are to finish this year in December in Paris to reach a universal climate change agreement. So in this past couple of years, governments have been discussing what should go into this agreement. They've been discussing that there's a need to mitigate, to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. There's a need to adapt to climate change. There's a need to take care of increasing resilience of the most vulnerable people. And this includes people that are in developed countries and in developing countries. So climate change is not affecting only the poorest people in the planet, but it's affecting everyone. And this has been very widely and clearly received by everyone. We've seen floods in Pakistan, in Colombia. We've seen Superstorm Sandy a few years back, which hit New York, and it flooded the entire city. The UN headquarters, even we couldn't go to work. It was all flooded. We see a lot of droughts happening also in Asia, in Africa. We see floods happening every year across Europe. So governments are looking at increasing resilience. How can we make sure that societies can adapt to this changing climate, and how each country can continue its development in a way that respects these planetary boundaries, how much the planet can absorb and take of the emissions that we are, as humans, releasing into the atmosphere. Part of these negotiations towards Paris, and we see, well, the two main things to do is reduce emissions and increase resilience and adapt to climate change. But you cannot do that without adequate financing the technologies and capacity building. So this is what in the UN parlance we call means of implementation. What do you need to implement, to do, to take action, to do these two other things on mitigating and adapting to climate change? So part of the discussion is really how much money countries need, people need, and that it has to be dispersed, it has to be delivered in a way that it impacts all levels of society. And we see here the role of businesses, the role of non-profit organizations, the role of governments. So we see the need to have public and private climate finance directed and technologies which are more efficient at renewable energy technologies, risk management insurance. So there's a whole range of financial products that are directed towards improving the economy and being a safeguard to the environment as well. Countries are also discussing the aspect of technology. How do we promote technology development, diffusion, transfer? And this is where governments cannot do anything by themselves. Clearly, all of the innovation, all of the creativity, all of the technology that is developed and that is widely distributed across the world comes from the private sector. We've seen how some people, even yesterday, presented, well, someone mentioned that a telephone nowadays has more capacity than the whole computer equipment, the whole system required to send a man to the moon. And these phones are not made by governments. Even in the 80s, one remembers the huge telephones that, they were so heavy, you would speak for about 5 minutes, you would have to stand in a specific place. If you moved 1 meter away, you wouldn't be able to receive a call. All that is gone. Many of us don't even remember that. Some of us don't want to remember that. Now a smartphone, it's a thing of every day, and it's developed by the private sector. So governments are working also with the private sector to do this. And capacity building, it's the last aspect of the negotiations. We need to help develop this capacity, educate, train, increase awareness among the entire range of stakeholders. And stakeholders mean governments, business, civil society, so just everyone across the board. So governments have been increasingly listening to the people, to the demands of people. And last year in September, my boss, the climate change, the Secretary General, launched or had a climate summit. And just before this summit, almost 400,000 people basically crowded the streets of New York. It was about 5 kilometers, I think, 2.5 miles, in New York, where this march would walk through. At some point during the day, the march basically stopped. People couldn't walk anymore. It was so crowded that there was no way to get to the avenue where the march was walking through, because it was full of people. And this is where everyone can, in this type of actions and activities, is where everyone can influence and can demand governments to reach this agreement. So even as governments and leaders are deciding, civil societies and business have a huge stake and are demanding and are already taking action. So it is not necessary to be a global leader to make a change, but it is necessary to be creative, to be innovative, promote young people to study science-related careers, going to engineering and physics, and try to seek innovative ways to continue the development that much of the world needs, so that the development that countries, least developed countries, small island states, they all need to continue their development to reach a similar level as developed countries have nowadays. What they need is this capacity building support, and it is possible. So if anyone asks me if we will reach an agreement in December, I say, sure, it's definite. And subsequently, people will increase their ambition in taking action on climate change with that. Thank you very much.